As is our custom, I ask you to bow to me. We offer prayer before we begin. Father, we give you thanks again for today and for the privilege that is ours to assemble in this fashion and in this assembly to debate the budget and to be doing the country's business. Father, as we examine these appropriations today, I pray that we might do so with a sense of a desire to be doing things that are most helpful and beneficial to the needs of our people. Father, these are important times for us all, and I pray that we will approach these appropriations and these discussions today with maturity and with a desire to accomplish what is best. Bless our deliberations today, Father, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen. Please be seated. Morning, colleagues. It's time for us to get started. This morning we are going to begin our examination of the appropriations to the Minister for International Trade, Investment, Aviation, and Maritime Affairs. However, the Premier had indicated to me as well, I need to make a brief statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving me this opportunity to address a matter of national importance. Overnight, Mr. Chairman, we have learned that the National Trust for the Cayman Islands and the Cruise Port Referendum Group have now filed applications for leave to bring judicial review proceedings aimed at delaying the referendum, which is set for the 19th of December. The government regards this action as most regrettable. There is now grave uncertainty as to whether or not the referendum will actually proceed, and the state of uncertainty and division in the country will only continue and heighten. None of us can now be certain that there will be a referendum on the 19th of December, but I wish to assure the country, and in particular a number of people who have messaged me since, that the public holiday fixed for December 19th will continue nonetheless. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman.
Member for East End.
I just would like to ask the Premier a question. In light of what the Premier just said, there seems to be some uncertainty within the government as to how they're going to respond to that judicial review. What is the government's position regarding the response? I got the impression that we don't know yet. Is that the right impression?
Mr. Chairman, these developments have occurred overnight. The the government's position is that we wish to proceed with the referendum on the 19th of December. That the position of CPR and National Trust is that we should not, and so they are seeking leave of the court to bring judicial review proceedings aimed at stopping or delaying the holding of the referendum. So I have not yet had the opportunity to sit down with the Honorable Attorney General or to see indeed what their application is and whether we believe it has any basis at all. So the government hasn't taken a view about that, but the government's position is that we believe it is in national interest for the referendum to proceed on the 19th of December.
So, Mr. Chairman, can the Premier say when he expects to make a definitive decision? I know the AG is off island or something like that, but...
No, Mr. Chairman, I'm in no position to say anything. I don't even know whether we will be invited to appear on the application for leave. Often these things are done ex parte, so I'm just completely uncertain now about where things are. But one thing is certain: the prospect of the referendum proceeding on December 19 is uncertain.
Okay, we're going to move on to the first item for examination today. ITI 1, International Engagement and Representation of the Cayman Islands, $3,693,136 in 2020 and $4,455,249 in 2021. Are there any questions?
Mr.
Member
Chair.
for Georgetown Central, and then the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is not a direct question, but I think you gave way the last time I brought this matter up because the Premier was not here. But I wanted it to be noted that the members of the opposition were not given their constitutional right to meet with Cabinet as per 47.3. And you said to bring it up at another time so the Premier can have the opportunity to respond. I wish you would allow me to read what 47.3 says. Where an elected district is not represented in the Cabinet, the member or members of the Legislative Assembly representing that district shall be entitled to attend a meeting convened by Cabinet once every 3 months for the purposes of A, making representations with respect to matters affecting their districts, and B, making budgetary representations when the annual plan and estimates are developed. Now, Mr. Chair, just for a matter of record, this administration and Cabinet has not given myself and the members of opposition the opportunity to make input into this budget for our constituencies. So I think it's important that it be noted.
Mr. Chairman,
Premier.
I think the member needs to read this section again. It says that members are entitled. As far as I know and I have checked, the only member of the opposition who requested any audience with the government about it was the Honorable Leader of the Opposition. That, unfortunately, was not brought to my attention until this issue was raised. It somehow the request fell between the cracks. So the Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Chairman, has a right to complain, but no other member, because the Constitution provides or declares there's an entitlement, but it does not place on the government any obligation to invite the members to come. Indeed, the Leader of the Opposition will agree with me that in the earliest stages of the last administration, when this Constitution was just settling in, I invited him and other members on more than one occasion, and he told me more than once, you don't need to invite me. If I want to come, I will ask. And so it's a bit ironic, but it is our fault that we didn't afford him that opportunity. But no other member made any such request. So,
Mr. Chair, is the Premier...
Mr. Chair, would the member please leave? Let me not say that. Let me just finish, please. So it is up to him and every other member to request an audience with the government. It is not the obligation of the government to invite him or any other member to come.
Mr. Chair, I see the Leader of Opposition is going to respond, but allow me to ask the Premier, are you suggesting that I did not ask you in this Honorable House before Cabinet came, before the budget came, for an opportunity to meet with Cabinet? Is that what you're saying?
Mr. Chairman, I have no recollection of that, but the proper process is a formal request, as did the Leader of the Opposition. As I say, we have to accept responsibility for that because his request was not brought to my attention, and the process proceeded without him having that opportunity. I apologize to him. I take full responsibility for that.
Member for East End,
Thank
Leader
you,
of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I agree with everything the Premier just said. I have interpreted the Constitution different from the first Cabinet that operated under this Constitution. That Cabinet, that government thought that it was at their invitation. That was not the case, in my view. When this previous, despite that, I attended, me and Mr. Miller, on a number of occasions. This previous administration, when it came into being under the leadership of the now Premier, he said to me, first on July the 25th, 2017, the Premier invited myself and Mr. Miller to make representation to Cabinet, and we did. Subsequently, the Premier brought it up with me, and I said, you don't have to invite me when I need to come in accordance with the Constitution. I will write you. That is what I said to him, because it's an entitlement that I can exercise. On September the 11th of this year, I wrote to the Premier. It was very short. Pursuant to Section 47(3) of the Cayman Islands Constitution, Order 2009, I write on behalf of the official opposition to exercise the entitlement to attend a meeting of Cabinet for the purposes of Section 47(3)(b), which was appropriation. We are available at the convenience of Cabinet schedule and look forward to your earliest response. Now, it must be at the convenience of Cabinet. It cannot be at my convenience. I am now hearing from the Premier that he didn't receive that letter. That's unfortunate. I really forget about the opposition or the leader of the opposition for a minute. That is the Premier of this country, and all correspondence to him must be delivered expeditiously, without delay. Suppose this was, listen, this is what gets me up in opposition to people who do not respect positions. And it's sad, Mr. Premier, that only after Finance Committee gets started were you notified, well, no, Parliament, because I said it in my response to your address. That is sad. Until the day this country respects that position that you hold, and the civil servants respect it, this country is not going any place, Mr. Premier. It must be respected. the decision is yours. It is not theirs to withhold anything from you to make decisions on behalf of this country. That decision is yours. We may not like it, we may not want it, but that decision is yours. You have to make those decisions. This is a sad day in my country. And to tell you the truth, I suspect the other letters that I wrote to you are held in some dark room, someplace up at that administration building. Somebody needs to look into it. That's what the deputy governor and the governor needs to start doing.
Mr. Chairman,
Premier?
Mr. Chairman, I can only apologize to the Leader of Opposition again, and I didn't even know the request was for the entire opposition because I haven't seen the letter. But Mr. Chairman, I don't think it has anything to do with respect. It's just one of those things that happen. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of paper. But I know the member, that the leader knows full well that I have no issue with members exercising that right. As he has explained, I have invited him and other members on more than one occasion. So all I can do is apologize again, and it is unfortunate, but I can't fix that situation at this point.
Mr. Chair, please, if you would allow, unfortunately, I'm saddened to just allow this to pass over as, oops, there was a mistake. This mistake has some serious consequences. As a result of somebody not doing their job, now the constituents of Georgetown Central has not had an opportunity to put their input in an over $2 billion budget. And their tax, Mr. Chair, just please let me get this out for the record, because those who are within the civil service who are responsible or appointees to make sure that message gets to the Premier who didn't do it has now disenfranchised the voters of Georgetown Central and the residents of Georgetown Central from having the opportunity to have the resources allocated to them that is their taxpayers' money. Now, this is a serious problem, and I don't know who's in charge to rectify it, but I refuse to allow it to just be, oops, it was a mistake. It's a serious constitutional violation of the opportunity to have my input.
I think the Premier has made clear what the situation is.
But the
There's
Premier
nothing
has
that
not
we
given
can do here
indication
at
as
this
to
point.
who will address it.
There is nothing that we can do here at this point.
Mr. Chair, I agree with that, but I'm asking what will be the actions as a result of this failure? Because it just can't be, oops, it was gone. Somebody has to say that there's going to be action taken for those who are responsible to make sure that message was delivered, because it's disenfranchised the people.
Mr. Chairman, we are all human. We all err from time to time. There's nothing I can do about that, and I'm certainly not going to have anybody drawn and quartered or whipped in Hero Square over this issue. We are taking, and I've already spoken to the Cabinet Secretary about the measures we're taking to try to avoid this sort of thing happening again. I can do no more than apologize again and accept responsibility, Mr. Chairman.
And Mr. Chairman, if the Premier can, in whatever methods he designed, just let us know. If it is to send an email to a particular person other than yourself that you know you're going to get it, put those systems in place, and that way I won't have to go to the government administration building to hand deliver letters.
Mr. Chairman, as I think everyone will understand, I receive a vast amount of correspondence every day. I can't personally have sight of it, of all of it. So unless it's flagged up and given to me, because I just can't keep track. So we just have to put in place more internal controls to make sure that these things don't happen again.
Let's move on. I already read out item for ITI 1 and call for questions. Member from East End.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I would like the Premier to give us an update on this new ministry, particularly surrounding the much talked about offices overseas. I think it's Hong Kong. And what is the status? No.
Mr. Chairman, the thinking of the ministry and the government had been, and still is really, that in order to continue to promote the Cayman Islands properly, and in some cases to defend our reputation and our key industries, it is advisable that we establish outposts elsewhere. We have thought about essentially three jurisdictions in Asia, Hong Kong, and in the United States, Washington, and also Brussels in the continental Europe. But we weren't attempting to do all of these at once, because that is a recipe, we think, for failure. Cayman has tried Hong Kong twice before without success. But it seemed at the time that we were planning this that Hong Kong was the place to go, given the volume of business that is there, Cayman's preeminence on the stock exchange over there, the use of Caymanian corporate vehicles by companies and individuals over there. But I think, as everyone is aware, the situation in Hong Kong, although there seems some indication of potential stability now, has been very unstable for the last few months in particular. So our plan had been to launch the office there this year, this fall actually. But we retreated from that position some months ago and said, we have to rethink this. We have to wait and see how things turn out over there before we proceed. So that's been pulled back. I can let the Chief Officer talk a little bit about some of the other thinking with respect to Washington. Brussels was always down the road, not contemplated within this term. But that's sort of where our thinking is at this stage. But I'll ask Mr. Bush if he'll expand a bit more, because he has more detail about these things than I do.
Mr. Chairman, I recognize that we're talking in particular about the attraction of investments, and I want to focus in on aviation and maritime affairs, and since the creation, have we seen any increase in aviation registration or maritime registration, yachts and the likes? Since the creation of this, which we went and jumped to different places to attract those in particular, I think Monaco and the likes. If there has been an increase in our registration here of aircrafts or ships.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Committee. Eric Bush, Chief Officer for the Ministry of International Trade, Investment, Aviation and Maritime Affairs. I think it's important to note that the Ministry has only really become operational as of August of this year. I was appointed as Chief Officer in February, and at that time I was playing both roles as the Cayman Islands representative in the UK, and then was charged with finding a replacement, which I'm very happy with the result of that. Since then, we have worked with the Maritime Authority of the Cayman Islands and the Civil Aviation Authority to understand their current book of business in its current form, what they're doing, what their marketing strategy is. And I will say individually, Mr. Chairman, that they both have a very extensive program that they go out to the world and sell and promote the registry, whether it be maritime or aviation. It is important to note the struggle that the Red Ensign Group had this year with the conflict with the UK and Iran, and whereby I think it was initiated by Gibraltar, whereby they seized a ship that entered their waters that was said to be carrying cargo that was within an embargoed sense. And as a result of that, Iran then said that they would seize any Red Ensign ship that was going through the Strait of Hormuz. So it is, as a result of that, Mr. Chairman, we did lose a number of registrations of cargo ships that went on to non-British ships. What the ministry is doing now is is working with Macy and the Civil Aviation Authority to try and see if there is a combined brand Cayman marketing strategy that we can, instead of going out to a yacht show and just selling the Cayman registry or just selling the aviation registry respectively, that it's one image and showcasing all of Cayman services, not just the registries, but also our tourism products and our financial services.
Mr. Chairman, I wonder if the Premier can explain for the benefit of the listening public. I know what it means, but this color code of ensigns, what the red one means in particular.
Well, Mr. Chairman, simply the Red Ensign is the maritime flag, the British flag. I mean, we do have Mr. Kenrick Ebanks here from the Maritime Authority, and he can provide a more detailed point of view if that's necessary.
Good morning, Kenrick Ebanks, Global Director, Commercial Services for the Maritime Authority. In terms of the flag, obviously we have the blue flag, which is for land base, and a red flag being Red Ensign, which is flown on the back of all Cayman registered vessels. The actual Red Ensign is actually made up of all of the UK overseas territories dependents and the UK itself makes up the Red Ensign. So collectively, all of those fly the Red Ensign flag. The Cayman flag, or the Cayman registry, when a vessel registers with us, they do not actually have to fly the Cayman flag. They can fly the British Red Ensign. I don't know if that's answering your question.
Yeah, I was just trying to show why Iran responded to it, like he was explaining, because it is British.
It is British, correct.
And Britain had gone and stopped one already, and it's
Correct.
the flag
Yes,
they're wearing, really. How many of these ships have unregistered as a result?
Mr. Chair, through you, there were 5.
Cargo only.
Correct.
There hasn't been any focus on yachts and luxury yachts from those countries who are responding to the raid in Zion.
Clarity, please.
Pardon me? No, I said there hasn't been any focus in by those countries, like Iran, on other category of registries, like luxury yachts and the like.
Mr. Chair, through you, not to my knowledge.
Okay. And we haven't heard anything about the aviation, if it has increased.
Mr. Chair, through you, I do not have those numbers, but I can give it to the committee by the end of the day. I can give as of the start of 2019 and current position, if that would satisfy members, by the end of today.
Mr. Speaker, I'll wait. That's fine. Those who I leave it, yield back to whomever.
Mr. Chair?
Member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Mr. Bush. Through the minister, though, is it fair to say that this new ministry will have the minister in charge doing a lot of traveling?
Well, a fair amount. I mean, the purpose of the ministry is to market the Cayman Islands. I mean, in some way, that's what it is. The things that we are to sell Cayman, essentially, in the sense of we are a good place to do business, good place to vacation, good place to live. It's a promotional ministry here.
Would it be fair to say that this is obviously an important ministry, but it even gives more reason to support the concept of an extra minister in respect to the constitutional suggestions and increase?
Well, it's one more ministry, as I think members would have realized. The Premier now has responsibility for the Cabinet Office, for the budget for the Office of the Commissioner of Police, Community Affairs, this ministry, the Ministry of International Trade, Investment, Aviation, and Maritime Affairs, as well as the Ministry for Employment and Border Control, as well as all of the other duties of the Premier. It is an incredible load, and I'm only able to do it, quite frankly, because I have an excellent counselor in the member from Prospect, and I have very good chief officers. But it not only wearing, but it also detracts from your ability to function properly as Premier, leading a government and doing all the things that premiers are expected to do. But that's not a complaint. I'm just saying that there is more than enough work for an 8th minister.
Thank you. I take that as a full yes. It does support reason for action.
Yes.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Obviously, this idea came out recently, or not recently, within the last year and odd, for the concept of this new ministry. But I am
About 2 years.
About 2 years. I'm interested, did this come from the concept that started in the UDP administration under the then Premier, Honorable McKeever Bush, when he was talking about a ministry that's going out selling Cayman? Because it sounds exactly the same.
Well, I don't know if this came from there, but he was right then. And what we realized is that there are numerous agencies and ministries who were doing the work of marketing Cayman, but there was no coordinated approach to it. And what we are intent on doing is developing brand Cayman and to create one front door through which business can walk, regardless of what it is you're seeking to do. We took some deliberate decisions that tourism has a long and solid track record of marketing that aspect of it, and so we wouldn't try to bring the tourism portfolio onto this ministry, but that we will work in tandem with them, so that when there is a boat show or there is a conference, what we are marketing together is Cayman. You got individual aspects of it, but there is one brand, Cayman.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. If my memory serves me well, weren't you against that concept when the then Premier McKeever Bush was suggesting it?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Chair, through you, just last two.
Why would I be against something that is so obviously the right thing to do?
But the good thing about the records will show whether you were or not. Moving on. Mr. Chair, can the minister say if, particularly when we talk about the advice from the UK offices, the UK office, UK Cayman office, that their role is to assist and monitor, or not monitor, but assist and be available for residents in the UK. Does the UK office have any registration or list of how many Caymanians are living in the UK?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the member, for those Caymanians who do register, obviously our special relationship with the United Kingdom, whereby Caymanians are eligible to apply for full British citizenship. Should they decide to move to the UK, there is no obligation, whereas in other high commissions or embassies, a foreign national comes to a foreign country, the foreign country, and then they register with their consulate or their embassy because they are directly linked. We do have a volunteer system whereby the office does have a register of individuals that we look to update on an annual basis to understand where they are, contact details, and issues like that.
Thank you. Last, but not necessarily a question, but a comment. Obviously, it's important, you heard me say before, it's important to keep some level of track of who is migrating out of Cayman, because we've heard about how many Caymanians are moving away for a better life and the like. I would suggest a little bit more promotion that in the event that a Caymanian decides to move abroad, that this volunteer program, because I can't see it being any other way, you can't mandate them, so I agree with that. But if they do choose to do so, for our own data collection and tracking of how the market is moving and how Caymanians' movement is, for us to do a better job at assisting them, promote it more for a person to say, listen, I have moved away, I'm now moving to the States or I'm moving wherever, that we can track that data and make proper analysis move. So all I'm asking is more promotion locally and even in the UK about Caymanians who are moving for whatever reason. Thank you.
Member for Bodden Town West. Member for Northside, you had questions as well? Okay, so Bodden Town West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I do support the concept of this ministry. I think this is something long overdue. And I think it gives us a chance to be more proactive in dealing with our international relationships as opposed to reactive that we were in the past. So I do welcome this initiative by the Premier and his government. One of the things I do recognize, though, is that in starting a new ministry, it is important that the proper controls and everything else be in place. And I couldn't help but notice, which we started on yesterday, with regard to some of the observations that were raised in the Auditor General's office, in the Auditor General's report, in terms of looking at the London office. And one of the things that we want to make sure is that, at a minimum, the ministry puts in place the proper controls and the proper culture to make sure in terms of accountability and everything else. So with that said, I noticed in the Auditor General's report that there were 7 areas of concern that were raised in the Auditor General's report. And I would just like, not to really get into them in depth, but just pretty much try to see where we are in terms of having those controls and everything else in place. So with that, Mr. Chairman, the first question directed through you to the Honorable Premier or the witness is that the Auditor General did raise the issue in terms of the credit cards management, where they were not fully in compliant with some of the normal accepted processes that we would have here locally. So I'd just like to see what steps have been made in terms of managing those issues since, and I mean, what can we expect going forward? Thank you.
Through you,
Bush,
Mr.
can I
Chair.
just ask you to state your name and position again for the Hansards, because we keep switching between you and other members as well.
Sure.
So it's important that they do that so that we know who said what.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. Eric Bush, Chief Officer for the Ministry of International Trade, Investment, Aviation and Maritime Affairs. Mr. Chair, in short, I will ask our Chief Officer, who is Mr. Vincenzi, to provide, Chief Financial Officer, what is it? To provide a full answer, but I just want to say that I agree with the Honourable Member and welcome and thank the Auditor General and her staff for the audit, which identified a number of issues which allowed us to address them fully. The Chief Financial Officer has been over to the office twice since then to do a site visit in the context of this and also other controls that perhaps were not highlighted, but to bring in line with best practice and good governance. So I'll ask the Chief Financial Officer, Vinton Chinsi, to answer.
Morning. Vinton Chinsi, Chief Financial Officer for the Ministry of International Trade, Investments, Maritime and Aviation Affairs. Or the other way around. We took over the London office in May of this year, which is less than 7 months ago. And one of the first things we did was to understand the nuances of how the office operated, the special circumstance that is an overseas office, trades in a different currency, and there are other local issues that we have to take into consideration. So a proper understanding of the circumstances they face was necessary. We reviewed the auditor's report as well, which was based on work done in 2018 under the previous ministry under which they fall, portfolio under which they fell. And we made significant adjustments, especially in the internal controls and the credit card area. We have canceled 3 of the credit cards and reduced the limits of the remaining 2 materially, and brought it more in compliance with what is done locally. Taking into consideration that the currencies are different, circumstances are different, and the way of operating business there is different from Cayman itself. In Cayman, we are able to use electronic purchase orders from our accounting system, stuff like that. They are not able to do that there. So they do more activities through the banks, etc. So we have made those necessary adjustments, sir, and internal control changes. And we continue to improve. We have also improved their record keeping as well, and the timeliness of recording transactions and reporting transactions. So we have made several changes to improve the internal controls. One of the things we realized is that some of the staff did not understand the implications of how they did things and how it affected the business or whether or not it was good control. It's not that they were doing it in a lax way. It's the only way they knew. So we tried to educate them as to why these things are necessary and the reasons why we put some of these processes in place.
Mr. Chairman, through you, just for my own curiosity, which finance, the Cabinet Office where this was held before, which finance team was responsible for the London office?
Mr. Chair, through you, Eric Bush again. The Cabinet Office had ministerial responsibility for the UK office. I was the representative at the time, so in that context, I was the head of department. It was understood that when I went to the office, I went there with 3 Caymanians who were doing a good job and to the best of their ability and to the best of their knowledge, their training. And it was quickly identified that as the office ramped up its operations, keeping in mind it does a sublease arrangement with the Maritime Authority, with the Department of Tourism in their office. There was no special accounting skill in the office itself, and that led to the successful recruitment of a business manager within that time. And it was, I think, it was within weeks of that individual being hired is when the audit happened. So I thought it was very timely that we had the audit there to identify these issues that gave clear guidance to the business manager over the last year to improve. And now that we are under this new ministry, we continue to make improvements. We're ever striving to improve.
So, Mr. Chairman, sorry. The question I'm looking for was who was the local CFO that was responsible for this ministry or for the UK office prior to where it's at now? Who was responsible for that?
I think, member, though we would prefer not to start naming staff members in civil service.
No, it's not a matter of naming. What I'm looking for is ultimately where the accountability is, because here is the issue, Mr. Chairman, so we're clear. This ministry may be new in terms of organization, but what it has been doing, as the Premier rightfully said in his answer to the Honourable Leader of Opposition, it's about centralizing coordination. And what we're looking for now is in terms of the culture, in terms of what it is that we expect. So this isn't a brand new ministry per se, other than it's an organization. The London office has been in existence before. The Maritime Authority has been in existence before. So all of these different units coming together have been in existence before. What has actually changed is they focus their priorities and what it is that they're looking to do. What I'm trying to establish from my own comfort level is in terms of the culture that created the shortcomings that was raised in the Auditor General's office. The people or the persons responsible for it are the ones who have basically learned and is basically moving on from it. What we don't want is a situation where, as if though nothing was happening before and no one is being held accountable. At the end of the day, these things happen, and what we're trying to understand, it doesn't have to be anywhere, because as far as I know, the Cabinet Office and this ministry still has the same quote-unquote ministerial infrastructure in place. So it is just the Premier doing his job in terms of getting the focus correct. So what I don't want is answers where as if though this is brand spanking new and this is nothing new.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's fully accepted. The infrastructure is there. The message was clear and appreciated from the Auditor General. Whilst the ministerial responsibility has changed from the Cabinet Office to the new Ministry of International Trade, Investment, etc., the report is there. The report is accepted, and the recommendations have been or are being implemented. Most have been.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, to the Premier, how can we have so many heads of department at the London office and get such damaging report from the Auditor General? That is devastating when you have heads of department who must put these controls in place. You have accountant, and now we still change of credit cards. Were they found to be abused?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman, there is an Auditor General report which is available for anyone to read. The issue was around controls and so forth. And as both the Chief Officer and the Chief Financial Officer have said, measures have been taken to address the concerns raised in the Auditor General's report. There was no question of impropriety or any such thing. And I'm worried that line seems to be starting to develop in the questioning.
Mr. Chairman, I understand the Premier, but I have been under scrutiny for less. Same credit card, but everybody else can get a free ride when the politician was stealing something. I didn't steal anything, I paid it back within days. So therein lies the concern. Now we're saying we have canceled credit cards. If it's not abuse, it's misuse. Whether that is buying the wrong things with it or no control over how much was being bought with it. But it goes for the politician that the politician crooked, but not for anyone else. That's unfortunate.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman. Just I won't go back into the issue of the credit card. One of the things the Auditor General did raise was procurement in terms of receiving competitive bids. Can they, through you to the witnesses, Mr. Chairman, can they at least give us an idea in terms of what processes are we now putting in place from a control standpoint to deal with procurement in the UK office? And I just want to preface it by saying that I do understand that between the time differences, being in a distant land, being far away, having a satellite offices, challenges will occur. We accept that. What we want to make sure is, and especially since we're looking at putting offices elsewhere, that we A, get the UK office right, so that B, when we do open other offices elsewhere, we at least have a proper template that we can follow to make sure the same learning curves that the UK office went through to get this kind of report, other offices don't. So, and this is why we're trying to get this control environment set. As a new ministry, we need to make sure we get it right.
Mr. Chairman, just to say to the Premier, and I know the member from Georgetown had said something earlier. During the days when those offices were being set up in Hong Kong and elsewhere, the Premier and I didn't object to the concept. We were concerned about the systems that would be put in place or not put in place, including the human capital. That remains today, and I am sure the Premier will agree with me that those are fundamentals that cannot, there must be no exceptions, because the fact that they are not here where we have direct supervision means we need to be very, very, very careful. It's too lucrative a position for us not to have a tight hand on it. And I hope that whatever offices we set up, wherever we set them up, in the interest of this country, that is a paramount concern. And we will not have this happening. The same concerns that the Premier and I had back 10, 15 years ago is what we see have come to light. That, maybe in a little slightly different way, but the potential, Mr. Chairman, is high.
Remember, we also have a question on the floor that the member from Bordentown West has asked, and I think that needs responding to.
My apologies, Mr. Chair. If I could ask for the member to please repeat.
Yeah, thanks. No, just in terms of the procurement process that the Auditor General raised in terms of not receiving like competitive bids and everything else. So we're just trying to understand what processes has been put in place in that regard.
Vinton Chinsi. One of the problems that created that situation was the adequate training or information passed to the staff. As the leader opposition pointed out, they are remote. And so there was no evidence that they had the necessary guidance as to what the normal policies are. Yeah, I'm just saying. No. So we have educated them in the need to get these multiple quotes, as well as what the procurement policies and laws are in the Cayman Islands, and that they apply to our offices as well overseas.
So thank you.
If you will, Mr. Chair, through you, just to add to, taking into context the level of procurement that was there too, which was under 1,000, 10,000, 13,000, 27,000 pounds, which were project-based initiatives, some of which had 3 quotes, some of which did not. That being said, since the Auditor General's report, it is firm policy that all procurement above 1,000 pounds receives 3 quotes. So to answer the member's question directly, that is the control measure that has been put in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just moving on to the next issue that the Auditor General raised also was travel expenses. In terms of basically, it appears as if though there weren't enough support and documentation, everything for some of these travel expenses and so forth. So I'm just trying to understand exactly what has been done now in terms of dealing with or managing the whole travel expense issues, especially. And I would just say hospitality expenses also, because they do go hand in hand together in terms of getting the necessary approvals and everything else and the processes surrounding that.
That is correct.
State your name again for me, please.
Mr. Chair, Eric Bush. So from this context, it wasn't that the information was not provided, it was the filing system, which has been updated and created fully within that, all within the remit of the business manager, which was identified back in 2017 as a need, and it took us a while to hire an individual to do that. That has since been implemented, but again, to the member's point, Mr. Chairman, clear accountability rationale of spending government's money is the theme, fully accepted, and something that has been implemented.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, Mr. Chairman, just so we understand, and I just want to have a better idea, so I'm clear. Considering that the London office was previously under the Cabinet's office, was it a situation then that the Cabinet office and the finance team of the Cabinet office didn't put controls in place, or was it a situation where the Cabinet office and the finance team that was there had controls in place and they weren't followed?
Through you, Mr. Chair, Eric Bush. The audit that was conducted in 2018, from the best of my knowledge, Mr. Chair, was the first that one had been done in many, many years. I think it was five to 6 years. So when I assumed the responsibility of the office as the representative, we continued business as usual, but as I saw things and the deficiency of a business manager, case in point, because the other three individuals that were there were not responsible for the internal controls or the business of the office. They were responsible for consular affairs, student affairs, political engagement, things of that nature, and representative duties of the Cayman Islands. The three Caymanians that remain there all have representative in their name, not accounts or not business. Whilst there was competencies in particular one individual who took that on, it was felt that the business of the office was better served in a specific role of business manager that was the accountable individual for ensuring these controls were implemented and everybody held accountable.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to understand, and I guess in as clear as possible, looking at the deficiencies that were raised, was it a situation that the Cabinet Office at the time that was responsible for this London office and the finance team didn't put the controls in place, or was it a situation where the controls were not followed? Because we need to understand if the controls were there and weren't followed, or no controls were there. That's just what I'm trying to understand.
Mr. Chair, through you, when I arrived in 2016, the controls were not there.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Member for East End.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, I want to take it to a little different thing, but depending on this. I need to address this with the Premier. Mr. Premier, I hope and I wish that we will operate our overseas offices without what I term political selectivity. It has been very much practiced within the London office. And I speak of first-hand knowledge now. And I don't think that's the objective of that office or any other office. I hope I don't expect it to ever happen now, because it is now, I guess, under different leaderships over the years. It has gone through a number of different leaderships, but it was practiced heavily, and it was an unfortunate set of circumstances, because people think that we don't have embassies as it is. We have one for Central America, we have one for the Caribbean, we have one for the EU, and we're going into Asia now too. So those are, in essence, embassies representing the country, and they must be run to engage, in particular, the Caymanians who travel throughout those geographical areas of this world. And there are sometimes that it's very politically selective, so to speak. So I would ask that you ensure that these offices maintain their neutrality and their ability to help Caymanians regardless of their lot in life or their family's lot in life.
All in favor of ITI, International Engagement and Representation of the Cayman Islands, 3,000,000. 693,136.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Before you take the vote,
Yes, sir.
I wish that you call the abstentions after the noes on this particular vote.
In respect of yourself, sir?
Yes.
Okay. All in favor of ITI 1, International Engagement and Representation of the Cayman Islands, $3,693,136 in 2020 and $4,455,249 in 2021. Standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. The ayes have it. I would like the record to reflect that the member for Northside has abstained from voting on this particular appropriation.
So do I, Mr. Chairman.
You want to bring it up?
Mr. Chairman? I abstain as well.
Okay, record can reflect that the member for Baden, West Bay North has also abstained. CMA 1, Policy Advice to Cabinet on Maritime Matters, $237,054 in 2020 and $241,795 in 2021. Questions? Member for Baden Town West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the Honorable Premier. I like the fact that this cost, the forecast for 2019, compared to what we're looking to spend in 2020, has decreased by 96,000. I was just curious to find out what is driving the decrease in costs. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'll have to defer to one of the technical officers. I don't know the answer to that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Eric Bush again. Quite simply, it's a transfer of some of the responsibility from the Maritime Authority itself into the ministry, and that was consumed in the previous output.
That's fine. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All in favor of CMA 1, Policy Advice to Cabinet on Maritime Matters for $237,054 in 2020 and $241,795 in 2021. Standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Those against, no. The ayes have it. CMA 2, Technical Advice and Support on Maritime Matters. Okay, I'm happy to take that. Member for Northside?
I had questions.
My apologies, sir. I didn't catch your CMA 2, Technical Advice and Support on Maritime Matters, $95,721 in 2020 and $97,635 in 2021. Would you like to make your questions at this point?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Under CMA 2, one of the descriptions is Marine Patrol Strategy and Work Group. Just to ask the Minister whether the new regulations that the Coast Guard are preparing for safety of commercial and private vessels in Cayman, whether Macy is having an input into those regulations to make sure that they meet the international standards that Macy is promoting.
Through you, Mr. Chair, in a word, yes. The Maritime Authority is heavily involved in that working group and providing expertise in their area for the purpose of the regulations.
Are you aware what international standard they are using as their reference guide?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I am not, but I am happy to give the member the information by the end of today on the exact international standard.
Member for Northside, you finished or are you continuing? Oh, All in favor of CMA 2, Technical Advice and Support on Maritime Matters, $95,721 in 2020 and $97,635 in 2021. Standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. Ayes have it. EI 78, International Trade, Investment, Aviation, and Maritime Affairs, $356,000 in 2020, $388,000 in 2021. Are there any questions? All those in favor of EI 78, International Trade, Investment, Aviation, and Maritime Affairs, for $356,000 in 2020 and $388,000 in 2021, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it. Members, that concludes the appropriations to the Minister for International Trade, Investment, Aviation, and Maritime Affairs. Members, we need to take a 15 to 20 minute suspension in order that the Premier can attend to some urgent business. So let's suspend for 20 minutes.
makeshift reflex hammer, so I really didn't use it too much. I don't know about orthopedic surgery. Exactly. So thank you for the introductions. As you mentioned, I am a board certified in physical medicine and rehab. It's basically a non-surgical orthopedic specialty. And from there, I did an interventional orthopedic fellowship. The fellowship is basically geared towards 100% dedicated to training physicians on how to utilize, evaluate, and treat patients with interventional orthopedic as well as regenerative medicine such as PRP, stem cells, and culture expanded stem cells. So today we're going to talk about, number one is what are orthobiologics. Number two, we're going to talk about where do orthobiologics really fit into our standard of care from an orthopedic paradigm. Then we'll talk about some